What's the first word that comes to your mind when you hear the word suicide?
Cowardice.
Hero.
Zero. Crime.
Sin.
Selfish. Stigma.
Disgrace.
Moral flaw. Depression.
Shameful.
Blame. Silence.
Guilt.
Stress. Character flaw.
Secrecy.
Gossip. Taboo.
Hopelessness.
Suicide. The word suicide caught your attention, didn't it? Sadly, it's the actions that lead up to it that go unnoticed. Every suicide is a tragedy. Suicide is a preventable public health issue. It cuts across all sections of society. It can happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime. Most of us tend to view suicide as crime or sin. As a result, because of the 4S, stigma, shame, secrecy, and silence, suicide still remains a taboo. According to the World Health Organization, one person in the world dies of suicide every 40 seconds. Over 8 million people in the world die of suicide every year. Of these, 33% of them are from India. This means around 336,000 people in India die of suicide every year. India accounts for 40% of the suicides among women globally. 15 out of 100,000 women die of suicide in India every year. This is twice the global suicide death rate for women.
If there's a suicide in your family, how would you feel? Like most people, you would feel ashamed. You would be tempted to cover up the cause of death. Perhaps you might even blame yourself for not having prevented it. You would judge the victim and yourself negatively. It would even cause disgrace to your family, a blot on your family's honor. The stigma around suicide causes unbearable shame, secrecy, and silence, the 4S.
Stigma also causes intense shame. A family in which a suicide takes place judges the act of suicide, the victim, and even themselves as shameful. Survivors of suicide attempts and survivors of suicide loss, those who have lost a close family member or a close friend to suicide, are burdened with guilt and self-blame. They often feel as if they and the victims have done something shameful.
Stigma and shame lead to secrecy. If there is a suicide in a family, people prefer to hide it and keep it a secret.
As a result, there is a tremendous silence around suicide. We prefer not to talk about it, we prefer to hide it. We prefer to keep it a secret. The stigma, shame, secrecy, and silence around suicide grows like a fungus. It grows in the darkness of negative stereotypes, ignorance, and fear.
Let's bring knowledge and awareness to shine on the 4S around suicide.
The 4S impacts survivors of suicide attempts and survivors of suicide loss. It prevents survivors of suicide attempts from seeking help and survivors of suicide loss from healing and rebuilding their lives after the tragedy. While reaching out to survivors of suicide attempts and survivors of suicide loss, it's important to be gentle and encourage people to seek help if needed. We need to create empowering conversations on suicide anchored in compassion, concern, and care. It takes collective effort to break the barriers and the wall of silence around suicide. It also takes commitment to build bridges of support and connection. Let's have stigma-free conversations on suicide that will melt the 4S: stigma, shame, secrecy, and silence. Preventing suicide is everybody's business. Every voice matters.
Let's stop 4S, shall we? Together we can.